Welcome to Shoulder to Shoulder, the ultimate peer support podcast. In each episode, we celebrate the incredible power of peer support and the way it transforms lives. So whether you're navigating mental health challenges or just curious, you're definitely in the right place. Hi, Nicky. Lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really excited for our conversation today. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes. So I'm also really excited, Kate, and thank you for asking me.
You're welcome.
So my background. So I've got quite a mixed background, long career where I was 25 years in the corporate world. And then I've also had a couple of my own small businesses, which I've done to sort of work around sort of what was going on at the time after I had my daughter so that I could be at home for her. I had a beauty business, and then I also I really wanted to write a blog. And it was way before people were even doing things like that. And I had no idea where to start, but I ended up having a really lovely, initially it was a parenting blog that then kind of grew with me to a midlife lifestyle blog. From that, I ended up supporting other people with their content creation and social media, and led me into networking again, which I've always been a big fan of, and collaborating with others. Then I ended up supporting some other small businesses with startups. And then I've always been very interested in personal development, and I sort of informally did a lot of coaching for others in the workplace. And then I formalised that in 2018, 2019, and did a coaching course with the Coaching Academy.
Wow. I did that as well. Not with the Coaching Academy, but I did do it with a different company. That's incredible. Who knew? Who knew you were so talented? It's fantastic. So how did you first get involved in peer support then?
So interesting for me with peer support, because I guess I trained for the job that I didn't know existed at the time.
Okay.
So after I had my breakdown in 2020, I always knew. So peer support was not something that was available in the trust that I was in at the time. So I didn't know it existed, but I knew that I had the coaching. And I knew that the only way was up. So I did everything I could. I did every course, and in sort of understanding more about mental health, a bit of counselling, and I just kept going and going, and then applying for jobs, which I always seemed to never had enough experience for that particular role, because we're looking at, moving towards sort of NHS roles and charity. So I never had the caseload experience, which was always a bit of an enigma. And I sort of later realised that actually that equates outside of, these types of organisations as a workload or a client base. And by chance, I happened to catch a advert that talked about peer support worker qualification. So I thought, what's this? So I Googled it and then realised that they were offering the training course in the East London Foundation. So I put my name down for that, went on the training course, one of the best training courses I've been on. And I've been on a lot in my little lifetime. And I say that actually, Kate, I would also put the With You training into that same category. After doing that, then I continued to apply for all of the different types of roles in mental health. And then I was successful at the end of last year in getting through an interview to work for Mind.
Wow.
As a peer support worker.
That's incredible. What a journey.
It was a long journey. It took me 2 years to get something. I was doing other work alongside it, but it took me 2 years to break into mental health, which there's a little bit of irony in that, because obviously the whole peer support thing is about lived experience. So I was being knocked out for other reasons of not having, specific things that seem to be more important than lived experience.
You mean by that you were kind of being overlooked because you didn't have enough experience in terms of caseload experience and stuff, but the irony was that you had loads of lived experience. Is that kind of...
Yeah, and of course I had caseload experience because I had my own coaching business, and then I've also held, clients within all of the jobs that I've done. So yeah, but I didn't get that memo when it clicked. I was able to sort of take a few strides forward. And now I'm in, I realise that it's no different to anywhere else. It's a workload.
You mentioned just then about there's something similar about these types of spaces. What is it about these kind of spaces that you find most appealing? Because they are special, aren't they? The spaces we create in our training are very special, sacred environments, aren't they?
They are. And I think the magic ingredient is that the stigma is left at the door. We don't even have to go there in explaining ourselves. We know that we're all there for the same reason. And I feel that the conversations transcend all of the stigma and all of the discomfort around mental health, and wonderful conversations and connections open up, and lots of possibility and a huge amount of learning from each other.
I get that too as a facilitator. I get it. It's just, I know it sounds trite, but it's just amazing. It is somewhere that I've never been before. I've never encountered a space like that where I've felt unjudged, where I can be me with all my flaws. I've never felt as if I could do that. And these spaces are, like I said, sacred.
Yes. And I have to say that the conversations that arise as a result of talking about mental health in a different way are so interesting, and there is so much gold in these conversations.
We almost empower each other without realising, don't we? We engage
Absolutely.
in these beautiful conversations, and we, as a result of that, we are empowered. Well, that's how I feel. They empower me every time I do a training.
Yeah, because, we're all united and there for the same reason, but everybody's story is so different and so fascinating. And we actually don't always need to know the story, but what we hear from the person about themselves tells us everything we need to know. I always say that all of these are just conversations, and they are, in an ideal world, peer support would be happening all around us, and everybody would be able to have these conversations without any discomfort. But we're not quite there yet. So
not quite there yet, but I've spoken to a few young people who are going into schools and delivering peer support to other students. And I mean, my dream would be that we embed this in education from a very, very early age, so people are able to feel validated and be able to feel safe and unjudged in discussing their mental health. And that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I suppose there's something around these conversations move towards pain rather than stepping away from it. And I think, perhaps our generation are the cycle breakers, because I come from, the generation when nobody talked about mental health. And many of that, and that's not to say that it wasn't present, because it very much was. It was just brushed under the carpet and hidden through shame and fear, probably. And, I hope that the younger kids are now able to talk about it a lot more.
I agree. I agree. And actually, in some cultures still today, it's taboo, isn't it? It's seen as something to be ashamed of. So hopefully these things take time, don't they, Nicky? But
we're here for it, Kate.
yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about how you perceive peer support. How would you define it in your own words?
So for me, it's about, having somebody to walk alongside you towards your recovery, however that looks for you. So, it's completely led by the individual. It's not about the peer support worker's agenda at all. It's about helping the client navigate what the next best step is for them, and having someone be able to hold that space. And we're never going to have walked in somebody else's shoes, but we do understand what it feels like to be in the depths of despair with no idea how we're going to take that next step forward and what that even looks like. I think, mental health can be all encompassing, and we can lose our identity a little bit and not really know who we are or what we're all about. But I think when you've got a peer support worker, we can see in others things that they can't see in themselves, that they really can't see in themselves, that are so obvious to everybody else. And the strength, to me, the strength and the possibility is as soon as that person walks through the door and sits down and shows up for themselves.
It's the first step, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. And I mean, I guess for me, as well as my the therapy that I've been involved in quite recently, my biggest peer supporter, if I really sit down and think about it, is my partner.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that's been able to see in me things that I think I've lost or I can't see. When I felt totally hopeless and useless and, like, quite frankly, don't want to be here, that support on a very sort of basic sort of level, just this beautiful sort of quiet belief and understanding is massive, really.
Yeah, and I love that for you, that you had that when you needed it. And, for me, my husband was that person to be able to, not having to sort of have difficult conversations where that somebody's cringing while you're talking and trying to move the conversation on. And yeah, there's so much power in that. And of course they can see things in us that we can't see ourselves.
It's very human, isn't it? It's really basic, like humanity. I say that word so often in these conversations, but it's that beautiful humanity, and very often that can get forgotten about in life, can't it?
Yes, it can. And there are so many people that need to have these conversations, want to have these conversations. The fact that people want to have them is wonderful. It's just a shame that there isn't always the space for them to access things like peer support. And in terms of therapy, I've part of my journey and getting to where I am now, I call them the two gems that took me to the next stage, because I had two wonderful psychotherapists that I work with. And then, from there, I had to keep saying, because there wasn't anything, from that, what can I do now? Where can I go now? I've had to have some really uncomfortable and cringy conversations where I've put myself out there on like groups that I've been in to ask who can help with this, when I was trying to get sort of back into the workplace. And what it's like when your finger's hovering over the button and you're just so really scared to press send. And all sorts of things come back when we step up and we make those choices. And, we kind of push ourselves, and you really do have to push out of your
Mm-hmm.
comfort zone when you're in recovery, because I always say if one thing comes from everything that we do, then it's a step forward.
Wow.
And then the next thing and the next thing. And I think that's the biggest thing with recovery, is we think it's got to be a great big fix and everything has got to be put right straight away. And that's, it doesn't work. And I think we've all been through that stage where we've realised actually everything we've tried to do before hasn't worked. And all of the things that feel there's no point, that's not going to help, are exactly the things that will help, have helped, and have moved me on so much more than anything.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful, Nicky. So moving on then, can you share your first experience of receiving peer support?
Yeah, so I haven't had peer support it wasn't available to me when I was a service user. So what that looks like for me at the time, obviously I talked about my husband, and then a couple of friends that also had experience of mental health in the past. It was also during lockdown. So
Right.
On the one hand, it was great. On the other hand, it was terrible. But yeah, those people that had sort of hope in me, and then, some family support as well. And, for the family, it was about having these conversations for the first time. And, that's hard as well. But
do you mean like you having to have conversations with your family about certain things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a generational thing. It's not something that people are comfortable talking about. But what I realised was that it wasn't the time to stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept on talking about it. And that's completely the opposite to how I've been for the first part of my life that led up to that point, because I didn't talk about it at all. And then once I started to talk about it, I carried on and I said a bit more and a bit more. And it kind of opened things up, I suppose, in, where other people sort of, people would say, oh, actually, so-and-so's suffering. And very slowly it felt as though things were changing. And of course, once, every family says that no one in the family has ever suffered with their mental health and that it doesn't come from this side of the family. But what we know to be true is that it has featured in most families on all sides.
Of course, everywhere.
Yeah, and it will continue to do so in some way or another. And it's about how that's held going forward. Because if us grown-ups don't talk about it, then how do we expect the kids to?
Exactly.
To actually talk to somebody rather than having it all play out on social media, to be able to have those conversations indoors.
And to be heard as well. To be really listened to and heard, Because very often I think people aren't, are they?
No. And, you keep hearing, it drives me bananas. What's wrong with everyone nowadays? We didn't have all this mental health business
in our day.
Yeah.
So let's talk about giving peer support. So when did you start providing peer support to other people?
So it was around about April time. Yeah, so I'm still quite a rookie, really.
And what did that look like?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful to finally start to have this caseload of people to support. And I still don't like the caseload word, because I feel that it's a bit faceless, and I rather think of them as clients. That feels a bit more inclusive and,
Caseload to me kind of gives the impression of being something rather heavy and like a load, where it's not that, is it?
There's just something about it that doesn't sit very comfortably with me. But yeah, so I love people.
Mm-hmm.
I am so interested in other people, to be able to, it's a privilege to work with these people. And of course, let's not forget that peer support is quite new. So not everybody understands what it's all about or what to expect. So it's all been a learning journey for me, for clients that haven't, had peer support before. And it's very much, it's not an exact science. It's very much tweak it as you go. And we do, if things don't work, then we look at it differently and we keep on doing it, and we'll do it and change it as often as we need to, because it's working towards what progress means for somebody else that's in their recovery. And that's not necessarily a straight line. And there's also, lots of parts of us that we discover, perhaps that we've forgotten about, but there's also lots of new parts that open up, I think, when we're in our recovery, where there's been, parts that have been closed down, where we've had to close a lot of avenues down because of being able to cope and keep on going. So I just think there's joy. There's joy in the small things and seeing, the tiny steps of progress and the rich conversations and the strengths, the absolute strengths and, character and everything that I'm able to see in clients is just wonderful.
It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I think some people prefer the term rediscovery, don't they? And I was having a conversation like this with somebody for the last series, and she basically said she thinks of it as rediscovery because she lost the person that she was when she was a child, that person that was going to take that trajectory of life. So this is rediscovering now the new person that she is and navigating life through that, through that kind of lens. So, and it wasn't until she said that I thought, I relate to that actually.
Yeah, I do too. And I guess I kind of use relearning as well, because from sort of a very young age, I learned to mask, and I wasn't able to access a lot of things. On the outside, I was, always very high functioning, but there were whole loads of areas that I had to close down because I just could not. My job was to keep intrusive thoughts under control, and that was a full-time job. So there's so much now that I'm doing that I've never done before, and there's a lot of those things where I feel very embarrassed, where I have sort of like gaps in learning and things that I've been able to participate in purely because I couldn't stay engaged.
Can you describe for us a memorable experience where you felt that you made a significant impact on somebody's life through peer support?
It's an interesting question, this one, because again, impact is the tiny things, and it's what we see, or I see, in everybody all of the time, because everyone is always making a step forward in some way, which is in turn, having an impact on their life. And that's not because, it's not a case of going, oh, wow, this person is going out doing this. It's just more that everyone is doing something, and that very small something that's going to lead to the next very small thing. You see tiny, tiny differences. And obviously, I'm quite new to the game as well. So I don't have sort of, a backlog of stories to tell. So I'm, I can only talk in the here and now of what I'm seeing.
Sure. But even those small steps are huge, aren't they? Because you have to start somewhere, and it's having someone, for me, I think, beside you as you're getting those little wins to kind of give you the safety net to go on to the next little challenge. And I think that's one of the beauties of it.
And acknowledging it as well, because, we can all be heard to say, oh, well, that was nothing. What about, I should be doing this, and what about this person? And, comparing to who cares what everyone else is doing.
Exactly.
If The only thing you've done that day is to walk from there to there. That's probably, a bit better than perhaps what you were able to do the day before. So that's a win in my book.
So how do you see the benefits of peer support in terms of how it supersedes kind of other forms of more traditional clinical interventions? So what are the most significant benefits of peer support for people?
So I'm kind of sort of breaking that down a bit. How I see peer support is I still feel it's a largely untapped area. I know that it's being used in many different places and some not at all. I feel that there is huge possibility. I see that there is lots of openness to it just in the short space of time, since I've been working in the role. I see things changing, and then I also see where there's probably lots of spaces where peer support and lived experience is going to start opening up, and it not necessarily in mental health, in lots of other areas. I mean, we could all do with a peer support worker in our pocket, right? Every day of the week.
Yeah. How amazing would that be? A Polly Pocket peer.
And because I see everybody as being so different, I feel that the benefits for every person are so different and the needs of every person are so different. So probably perhaps the things that I may have got from peer support will be different to how it was for you.
Yeah. But in terms of, say, against the clinical model, sort of generally against a clinical model, how would you, what do you see the benefits?
I think it's sat within the multidisciplinary team. There's space for everybody, and once that flow gets going, I think there's probably, the workflow of everybody. There's the more holistic approach, and the open dialogue and the conversations that are had. I think it can all work brilliantly. I think there is space for everybody.
Absolutely. And in terms of your role, obviously you said you're quite new in this role. How do you see yourself evolving in this role over the next few years?
Yeah, I feel that there's lots of opportunities that haven't revealed themselves yet, but also it's been a bit weird because since I started, so many opportunities have opened up for me, and it's almost like every part of me is saying no, and then my mouth opens and I say yes. So I'm saying yes to things that I would never have dreamed of doing in the past, in terms of, running my own groups, delivering sessions, speaking about peer support, speaking up, advocating, doing podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be something you could do in the future, Nicky, as an extension of your blog.
Well, I don't have the blog anymore. The blog, I stopped writing. I did consider starting a blog on mental health, and I did get it underway, but something didn't feel right for me. Something was jarring. So I put it on hold, and actually what I think was that was not the right medium for me to move forward with. Podcasting, again, always wanted to be a podcast guest, never thought it would happen. Would love to have a podcast. Ended up having a conversation with somebody the other day that said, we can help you with this, and this. And I'm like, whoa, it's almost like all of the things that I've always wanted to do seem to keep appearing.
I find blogs I do like writing blogs, but when you're dealing with sort of subject matter like that, I find them quite isolating and really triggering personally. It's not something that I could do, but podcasts, when you're kind of talking in this sort of context in an almost peer-like fashion, it's so lovely and it's nice and safe.
Yes, it is. And I think there has to be a flow with it. You know, when I first started blogging, like nobody really knew what it was, and it was all a bit weird, and it was great. You know, it was humorous and it was relatable, and you know, all of the things with, you know, parenting and all of my loves and passions and joys, but just not for this particular part of my life. So, but that's fine, because actually there's lots of other things that have come forward.
So, Nicky, thinking now about the training that you received to become a peer supporter, what kind of training have you gone through?
So obviously I did the East London Foundation Trust peer support training, and then as part of my role working for Mind, we are able to join in with the With You training, which it's a lovely forum for bringing, again, people that are already like-minded souls that haven't met yet. And it doesn't feel like training, because it's open and reflective, and it's not being pushed towards a particular outcome. It's about the conversations and the insight that we get from each other as a result of the scenarios and tasks that are presented to us.
And how do you think that this training has prepared you for your role? Because you're quite new in the role. How do you think you're going to be able to apply and use this? I
think, you know, hearing other people's stories and you know, how things have been for them as well. You know, there was a nice mix as well. So there were some people that have done it before, some people that are only just getting started, and being in the company of people that sort of face the same challenges or will ask the question that you think, oh, I'm so glad somebody asked that, or you've asked a question, you know, in our last session where it was really getting down to the nitty gritty around the challenging aspects.
Yeah.
And all those delicious questions that we then were able to brainstorm with each other and realise that actually, people in other roles are struggling with this particular aspect or finding, you know, this particular thing hard, and then collectively coming up with the solutions.
Fantastic, Nicky. I'm going to ask you just 2 more questions now, and I ask these to everybody. What would you say that your biggest achievement to date is?
I'm going to say being where I am now.
In what regard?
Because I feel like the becoming really unwell was a bit of a shit sandwich. Everything that has come from it, you know, because for me in the past, it's all been sticking plasters and keeping everything down, masking and hiding it. And I didn't realise that I'd been masking until I started to understand a lot more about what was going on. So on the one hand, these things feel like the worst thing that's happened, but what's come from it, you know, I feel like I'm a 3D person now. I feel like I have a 3D life.
I love that.
I know myself, and I'm still getting to know myself, and I'm all right with all of that. You know,
it's so liberating, isn't it?
It is liberating. And of course, you know, we'll all be doing the work until the day we die. Of course we will. You know, it never ends, does it? It's, you know, the things pop up and you think, I really can't believe this is happening to me. And I've had so many of those moments that could have broken me. But, you know, I've stepped up in a different way in the last 4 years. And done things differently. And I'm not the same person that I was. You know, my life, I am the happiest I've ever been in my life now.
Wow. That's, I love that. So happy for you. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's so lovely to hear. And then my last question today then, Nicky, is who's your biggest inspiration?
So my biggest inspiration is everybody that I know, and there's a lot of people that struggle to put one foot in front of the other a lot of the time, but they're doing it. And I find that is particularly inspiring, knowing the strength that takes. It's not all about great big fancy, look at me, look what I've done, look what I've achieved. It's not that kind of thing. It is about, the struggle that people face. So many people suffer in silence, and the pain of that is huge. And I look back, on people that have been in my life that did suffer greatly, that wasn't able to share because there wasn't an opportunity to do so, that went through some really awful and difficult things and carried on. And I'm not suggesting that that's the best way, but given no choice, I'm proud of many of my predecessors.
What a way to finish. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy to be in your company today, Nicky, and I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's just been lovely, and I'm really inspired by you.
Thank you.